people, just like today, traveled. Again, it's social time, so they wouldn't hop on a plane, obviously, or a train. But you might go to the next town, or you might go a couple towns away to be with family and friends.
Which would take a long time.
Yeah, it would take 3 hours to get from New Haven to Guilford.
Yeah. What do you think changed in terms of a harvest celebration where you've harvested the food, your life on the farm that was extremely time-consuming and exhausting was done? The hay was in the barn, literally. The food, all the food was ready to be canned or preserved in some way. When did that change, the harvest dinner? When do you think it segued into this idea of a Thanksgiving dinner? Was that in the middle of the 19th century?
One of the great places to go in New England to learn more about that aspect of history and Thanksgiving in particular is Plymouth, Massachusetts. Next year is the 400th anniversary of the Plymouth Rock and Pilgrims settling New England, and but they also was obviously the site of the quote first Thanksgiving. Plymouth Plantation is a museum. Pilgrim Hall is a different museum, and they both deal with this subject, and they'll occasionally have exhibits or things you can look at that speak to that story. Thanksgiving, and also how Americans had celebratory activities involving harvest. So I think it's an almost innate thing.
I was going to ask you this question. You've raised the point that Thanksgiving was really mostly defined by social collection. People would come to find other relatives or friends from distances. Would they have to, the houses then were so small, would they have to change, do you think, a lot? Did they have to change the interior of the home and the way they would set things up in those days?
Well, they moved things around. In fact, there were some of the great examples of early American antique furniture are things that fold up and collapse and be put away, like a gate leg table. And one of my favorite houses in Connecticut is the John Watson House in East Windsor Hill, Connecticut. And it's 3 stories tall, 4 rooms on each floor, and fireplaces in each room. That's 12 hearths.
Wow. And
I strongly doubt that there was ever a day in the history of the house where all 12 were on at once. England that came here in the 18th and early 19th century were always struck by how warm American houses were comparatively, that they'd already cut down all their trees in England, so it developed a conservation ethic. But, and I mean, it got bad here, too, in the 19th century, but people had woodlots, and there was, just wood everywhere. Initially, in the 17th century, wood was the thing to be destroyed so they could create farms and settle. And so they used it with abundance. It would be like today if gasoline was, if you could fill up your car for 50 cents a gallon, it might change your habits.
These social meals. With the actual act of cooking that would obviously be in the hearth, that would obviously be in the main social part of the house, would then the act of cooking be part of the social interaction?
And there are some wonderful illustrations that show people, the fires did matter. And depending on which room was heated, that's where you were. And on a cold day, you might condense all your activities to one central room where the cooking was also done. And so moving around, central heating is just completely non-existent concept with 20 people in them.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow. And the question for you would be, because I think I know this, but I'm not sure. My sense is the home dramatically changed in terms of cooking once we began to think about stoves that were essentially coal-fired originally, I think, then gas. But when stoves happened, the hearth ceased to be a cooking thing. It started to be essentially a television set, I think, for people.
No, it was earlier. Probably, it depends on the house and the family, but I think 1840s and 50s.
Wow.
And in fact, Stafford, Connecticut were pioneers in manufacturing some of these stoves. Albany and Troy were the center of that industry in the Northeast. But stoves come in a big way in the 1840s and 50s.
And when you think about it, that one appliance completely changed the way people socialized at times like Thanksgiving.
Just really interested in libraries as a building type because they're often very beautiful. And I would say that I've never seen a library building in the Northeast built before World War One. Big, dramatic fireplace somewhere in a reading room or elsewhere. And you scratch your head and you think, like, why in an age of central heating, why would you look back to a different period and create this thing? And I think the answer to that is homeliness, a sense of this powerful emotional connection to the hearth as a bonding influence in people's lives. It's something that had a social dimension to it. And I just love that idea. I think some of our libraries, it would be fun to go to one of them and see somebody because those fireplaces were all used in the 19th century and early 20th century, and then at some point, party down.
Hey, well, you got to get back to your party, and I really want to thank you, Bill Hosley, for coming on Homepage Radio.